Hey everybody, welcome. Let's start this again. We are live, folks. Welcome, one and all. This may be a little different tonight. We're going to explain that in a few minutes. I hope you're doing well. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Myers Corp Cosplay. This is my podcast, Monday Night Nerd, and we have gone through a few changes this week because of last week. We're going to get into what happened, what the changes are going to be. We're also going to talk about a new trailer that just dropped. We're going to talk about Resident Evil 9, which I got a feeling a bunch of you are here for, and then you're going to duck out real quick after that. And we got to talk about Comic-Con's coming up. First, I'm going to let you guys sit for a minute. We're going to talk about this new setup, what's going on. This is different. If anyone was here last week, you guys know that we had some streaming issues, which has not been an issue lately, but it was this week or last week. So what happened was there is a platform that I pay for called Talk Studio. If you're friends with the Geeks & Co squad, that's the same program they use. That's why I started using it, because they recommended it. And it just didn't stream. It didn't stream. I tried a couple times. I could see everybody in the chat. I was not coming through my channel though. So we ended up having to hop onto what we're using right now, which is OBS. This is a platform that streamers use for Twitch and a whole bunch of other things. I ended up messaging Talk Studio after the show was over to find out what went wrong, because I went into my account, I deleted all my connections and all that. It took them 5 days to get back to me. And what they got back to me was basically I had to go into the back end of my account and delete pretty much any connection I've ever had and then reset it, and that should work. And I said, well, that just doesn't seem like something that should need to happen. Like, you have a section on your profile that says what your connections are. If they don't work, that's not my problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to try streaming tonight on this. It's a little more complicated. We had a little issue at the beginning of starting the stream. I know how to do it properly now, but we're going to try this, because if I can do it this way, it's going to save me about $21 a month and not have to use a stupid platform. I control everything on here. Everything seems pretty seamless. We're going to give it a shot. So bear with me if we have any issues today. We're going to jump into one more trailer news, a little bit of trailer news, and then we'll jump into what I think is the co-main event tonight, because everyone that is messaged once they saw my story wants to know my thoughts on Resident Evil. If you are a Nintendo fan, which I am, the Nintendo Direct just launched on YouTube, and it was all showing the new Mario Galaxy trailer, the final Mario Galaxy trailer before the movie debuts at the end of the month, beginning of April. And you know my feelings on trailers. I feel like there are some times when studios show a little too much, and I feel like we're getting close to that area in this one. One of the best parts about that Mario movie was they only showed the necessities, and you got to go into that movie, and if you're a hardcore Mario fan, you got to see all the little Easter eggs. You got to see them for yourself, and your jaw dropped in the theater with everyone else. This latest trailer is kind of showing everything, and I feel bad for it, because this is something that movie studios keep failing on. The trailer was good. They showed a bunch of characters which had been teased in posters. They showed them full-fledged in the trailer, their worlds, what we're doing. If you played Mario Galaxy, you kind of know the storyline. There are some changes in there, but so far, it is a good trailer. I'm super excited to be going to the movies and seeing it again, seeing the new movie in April. I will be going on the premiere night, as I usually do with most of these movies. However, I'm going to do something a little different, and I don't mind saying it here. If anybody is, in my neighborhood and wants to go with me, I will probably be getting tickets to go to the local Landmark Theater, and I will be dressing up as Luigi. But one of the benefits of Landmark is you can do what's known as a shout out before the movie. You could pay an extra couple bucks, and by a couple bucks, I mean about $20, and you could show like a trailer before the movie, basically hyping up whatever the thing is. Like if you're having a birthday party, you can say like, hey buddy, happy birthday from mom and dad and all your friends. Hope you have a good night. But this idiot is going to dress up as Luigi, and he is going to shoot a video, and they are going to show it before the movie. And I, the schmuck I am, is going to be sitting in the audience dressed as Luigi, and I'm going to be there. I am super excited to do that. I wanted to do it for the first Mario movie, but I wasn't able to go opening day. I believe we were away at the time. But this year, I'm available. I'm going to Landmark, and I'm paying the money because it's $20. I might as well. And I'm going to plug the podcast. I'm going to plug my Instagram and my TikTok and all that. So if anybody's in the neighborhood and wants to go to the movies with me, I'm more than happy to do it. I want you all to be there because it is going to be super fun. I will bring my phone out for that, and I will record it, and I'll throw it on social media. But yeah, it is something I want to do, and I think this is the perfect time to do it. All right. We are here. Let's talk about Resident Evil 9. I picked Resident Evil 9 up on launch day. It is the first time I bought a launch game in years. I am a really big Resident Evil fan. I've been a Resident Evil fan since I got Resident Evil 2 for the N64, because I had an N64 when I was a kid, not a PlayStation. And I have always loved the series. I've played many of the games, not all of them, but many. And this was one I was really excited about because Leon is one of my favorite characters. All right, here's my review without spoiling anything, because there are a lot of people who are still playing it. There's a lot of people who haven't even started it. I know you can pretty much go online and see every spoiler online in about 10 videos, but I'm going to do this without spoiling. Overall, we know that part of the story is about Grace, part of the story is about Leon. It is pretty much evenly split, I would say. There's a big section at the beginning with Grace, there's a big section with Leon, and then there's a little bit broken up here and there throughout the rest of the game. I think they do a good split. I was worried it was going to be a little bit heavy on one or the other, but it was actually a pretty even split throughout the game. I will admit I never really felt worried about getting obliterated in the game, which I did play it on casual. I play all my games on casual because I hate getting frustrated and dealing with not being able to progress. I'm a story guy. I love the stories of games. I will play 99% of my games on casual. I will replay it again, and I will bump up the difficulty because casual was pretty easy. So if you've never played Resident Evil games, play it on casual. If you've even played one, you could probably bump up the difficulty because casual is very casual. My favorite section in the game was Grace at the beginning. Grace's first section in the hospital was my favorite because my favorite game is Resident Evil 2. So having that close quarters mansion type feel was exactly what I needed. It was different than Resident Evil 2 because it was first person with Grace. As I said last week, you can switch whether you want to do first or third. The default is first person with Grace, third person with Leon. I played that way, so Grace was first person. I loved it. Is there any parts I didn't like? Not really. I thought all of it was pretty good. I thought there was enough ebbs and flow in it where it wasn't terrible. I know there is a certain Grace or a certain section in the game that a lot of people online are complaining about. I didn't see a lot of issue with it. I don't want to say what section it is because it does kind of spoil the game a little bit, but there is a small section where you're playing first person as a character, and it's not the most exhilarating part of it, but it wasn't something I hated. The ending was okay. It was pretty much a Resident Evil paint by numbers, small thing turns into a big giant monster. That's what I kind of expected, so I wasn't really disappointed by that. I would definitely say Resident Evil 9 is one of my top 5. It is not going to get my top 3 though. For those wondering, and I am going to do a episode in the future where I'm going to talk really heavy with Resident Evil with a guest, and I'm also probably going to do my top 10 Resident Evil games. But for now, because we are talking about, I will give you a short version 5. My number 1, as I said, is Resident Evil 2, and I put both of those together, the remake and the original, because it's a story that I care about. I don't really care about the game. The gameplay's not a big change for me. Number 2, I would say Resident Evil Village. I really dug that story. I really dug that first-person viewpoint. Resident Evil 4 was number 3. Requiem would be number 4. And number 5, the offshoot, the crazy one that everyone laughs at when I say it's one of my favorites, Resident Evil Dead Aim is one of my favorite Resident Evil games. I know so many people don't know what that game is, and not many people who do know like it. I've never been someone who speed runs games. I used to speed run Dead Aim when I was a kid. I clearly remember going to my grandfather's cottage when I was a kid and everybody was asleep. I woke up bright and early, watched the sun come up on the dock, and I ran inside and speed run that game and made it through the whole thing within like an hour, hour and a half. I love that game. It's still a great memory in my heart, so that will always have a soft spot. So overall, I liked 9. I thought it was a great story. I thought it was a great game. If you're a Resident Evil fan, you will love it. If you're new to the Resident Evil series, I would say start with 2. Start with something further back. Don't make this your starting off point. You'll be confused. You won't pick up on a lot of the little Easter eggs in it. You'll enjoy them, but you won't get the full experience if you haven't played the earlier games. We got some people in chat. We got Pretty Nerdy Crystal. We got Noah. We got Boomster Joe. What are we talking about in chat? Pretty Nerdy Crystal saying her boy is sick. Hopefully he gets better. He better not give it to me, Boomster. Last year I had strep for Comic-Con. Do not get sick for Comic-Con. We're about to talk that in a second. Damn, and I was here hoping for some juicy rage bait from Noah. No rage bait. I thought it was a good game. I thought they did a great job on it. Yeah, I really can't rage bait on it. I really can't rage on it. I thought it was a fun game. I thought they did a good job having that balance. And overall, if you liked Resident Evil 2 and you like Resident Evil 4, it's kind of a mixture of both. I think it kicks a lot of butt. The only other thing we got to talk about tonight is kind of what Crystal talked about. We have 2 Comic-Cons coming up in the Southern Ontario area in the next 3 weeks starting. We got Toronto Comic-Con starting on March 20th to 22nd at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. I will be there. I will only be there on the Sunday, the 22nd, and that is because with my Fan Expo Premium Pass or Special Pass, whatever it was last year, I get in for a day free, and it's either the Friday or the Sunday. I will be there on the Sunday. And then we have Toronto Game Expo on the 28th and the 29th at the Intercare Center on the exhibition grounds, Hall G specifically. I will be there on the Saturday. I will be hanging out all day with some friends, and then for a little while, I'll be over at the Super Smash Bros. Booth, hanging out with those folks. I can't wait. There's a bunch of them that I haven't met. I can't wait to talk cosplay. I can't wait to talk about Super Smash Bros. Because Super Smash Bros., who doesn't like Super Smash Bros.? I think it's going to be a lot of fun. The only cons I'll be at this year is Niagara Falls Comic Con and Fan Expo, says Brian. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, some people have to pick and choose. I completely understand that. I'm going to be going, if I didn't get the free pass for Toronto Comic Con, I probably wouldn't be going. And Toronto Game Expo, I love that con. I had a lot of fun last 2 times I've been there, so I had to go again this year. Fan Expo is going to be amazing. Fan Expo is going to be amazing. So is Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls is going to be unbelievably packed this year. If you haven't checked out the guest list for Niagara Falls, go check out their website. They have been announcing people like crazy. I will be there. I will be running around with my hair on fire, leading the volunteers in the autograph area. So if you can swing by, try and say hi. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk that much, but hopefully I will see you guys there. All right, we are on our way. We're 15 minutes in. I think it is time to talk about the sponsor. And by the way, guys, if you guys are here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, all those things. If you're following on TikTok, you guys should follow TikTok because I got a bunch of videos coming out starting tomorrow, and we got a whole bunch of new stuff I have shot and will be editing in the next few days. Also, we talked about the Mario trailer. Tomorrow, happy Mario Day, folks. It's March 10th, which means it's Mario Day, so if you're not celebrating Mario Day, what are you doing? I'm going to be, because, I got a Mario cosplay. Actually, I got the Luigi cosplay right behind me. I'm getting it ready because for the Smash Bros. Booth, I will be rocking Luigi with some upgrades. Sponsor, as always, folks. You know, if you've ever been here, you know the podcast. It is my beautiful, loving, incredible, amazing wife. She is the sponsor, as always. She's out with some friends tonight, enjoying some anime, and I wouldn't be doing this without her. I would not have the cojones to be here every single week talking about nerdy stuff, whether it's cosplay, whether it's comics, movies, music, wrestling, and a whole lot more. I would not be doing it without her. Hun, I love you. You will always be my sponsor. All right, let me take a quick drink of water. Lark Bark in chat says, of course, I've already been subscribed. I appreciate that you would take the time to subscribe. It means a lot to me that you guys would even take a chance on a guy like me talking about nerdy stuff. All right, folks, we have not done a wrestling episode in a while, so I thought it was time. To do a wrestling episode. I am a hardcore wrestling fan. I wouldn't say I'm a historian of wrestling, but I've been a fan since 97, whether it's been, crazy watching absolutely everything, or nowadays because I'm getting older and I have more responsibilities like this and cosplaying a whole lot more. I'm not watching it as much, but I'm still a fan. I'm a really big fan, and I see WWE still talk about how great WWE is because they have to, because they will always pat themselves on the back of how great a company they are. They have given a lot of love to ECW over the years, probably because Paul Heyman is one of the executives at the company. However, I feel like even today, after all this time, we don't talk about WCW that much. WCW has always been this redheaded stepchild that, unless you're Eric Bischoff or DDP or someone who's got a podcast or a platform, they'll talk great about WCW, but WWE just doesn't really showcase it as much as I think they should, probably because WCW back in the day beat the living daylights out of WWE for 86 weeks, 84 weeks, 83 weeks, 83 weeks. That's what Eric Bischoff's podcast is. So WWE has always kind of held this little bit of an internal grudge on the folks in WCW. So they've never really given them love. And I just want to, showcase that there were some amazing superstars in WCW, because back in the day when I started watching in 97, I had WWE on one night a week, and I had WCW on another night of the week. So I would get to watch both all week, and I could, back in the day on some, US stations, they were live back to back, or they were at the same time. So you had to choose. I thankfully, up here in the Great White North, didn't have to. So I wanted to talk about my favorite superstars growing up and when I was watching WCW. Now, there are some rules, and there are some little caveats here, and that is because, as I said, I am a WCW fan, but I'm a WCW fan from 97 forward. So I know there are amazing WCW superstars before. A lot of the WWE guys started in WCW, and I'm well aware of that. But I have to look at these guys from when I watched them live. That is a caveat. So if you're watching this and you're going, but so-and-so, like Brian Pillman and Arn Anderson and all these guys who are great superstars before 97, they probably won't make the list if they weren't wrestling regularly during 97, 98. So that's a caveat. Let's start things off. Let's start things off with someone that is sort of the pinnacle of WCW, someone who held the flag for WCW before 98, 97, and throughout 98, 97, all the way up until the company closed, and that is the man called Sting. Sting has always been the crown bearer of WCW. Now, I'm, again, 97, 98 era, I have to go with Crow Sting, because I didn't watch Surfer Sting. I've watched him since, and I watched him, on videotapes, but live, Crow Sting was the man. And it's White Crow Sting. I love Wolfpack, but Crow Sting, White Crow Sting, is the one that I care about. So why Sting? Well, again, he was the man for WCW. He was the one who was probably, besides Goldberg a little later, he was the one who was going up the big NWO entity. And as much as I love the NWO, and I am NWO for life, you had to appreciate someone like Sting who would just stand there and not really have to do much, but intimidate everybody in the NWO, from Hogan all the way down to Six, Buff Bagwell, etc. Sting was an intimidating presence because you had him not coming down, not talking, not saying how he's going to beat people. Sting was up in the rafters, looking down at the NWO, just knowing his presence terrified them. And I love that as a kid. I thought that was such a cool thing. And that was even before I knew what Crow was and what that the face paint is kind of a ripoff. Not really. Well, it is kind of a ripoff of the movie The Crow. Famously, Sting wanted to change his face paint, and Scott Hall showed him The Crow and was like, you should do something like this, and Sting ran with it. And it's probably, as much as everyone loves Surfer Sting and his colorful makeup, this is the look that 95% of fans remember him for. Lark Bark in chat says the Crow Sting is iconic. I really don't like the two Sting stories, says Boomster Joe. Yeah, that was a little cheesy. If you don't know, back in the day when Sting was intimidating everybody, the NWO brought in their own Sting character. It was a little goofy. It was a little dumb, but it's wrestling. What storyline did not have a little goofy thing or stupid thing like that just made you kind of laugh at? Yeah, the intimidation factor of Sting was such a fun thing as a kid, that you had all of these guys you had from people like the world champion of Hulk Hogan to the 7-foot giant to Scott Hall to X-Pac or Six to Buff Bagwell, Scott Steiner, all of these NWO guys who could beat the daylights out of anybody in the roster. But when they saw Sting, they got scared and they got intimidated. I thought that was such a cool thing. And then later on, he became a little more iconic with a little more talking when he started walking around with the ball bat, kind of taking lines from the Jim Carrey Riddler from Batman and Robin, or Batman Forever, with the Who's Afraid of the Big Black Bat. I thought that was kind of cool. But overall, Sting, and by the way, folks, these are not in any order. These are just, I'm going through 10 of my favorites. I'm not going through them individually, 1 through 10. These are just 10 of my favorites. Boomster Joe, his Crow transformation might be one of the most successful character reinventions in wrestling history. 100%. 100%. I cannot deny that. It is definitely something that could have crapped the bed pretty quickly, but he did such a good job with it. The way that they worked that character into feuding with the NWO right off the bat was such a good idea. Lark Bark said, I love the Crow Sting was a reflection of the shift that WCW was going through. Agreed. They were trying to go more reality-based. They were trying to go more dark, and Sting was a great figurehead for it. Boomster Joe also said, Sting felt like the conscience of WCW. When the NWO took over, he became the silent figure who presented that WCW was supposed to be. Agreed. 100%. 100%. All right, so we've gone from Sting. Now, again, I want to say I'm a 97, 98 fan, so that means one iconic superstar that everyone, and especially in my country, loves. I didn't get to see a lot of his WWE run. I got to see his WCW run, and that was Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, just to warn you, this is not just going to be all ex-WWE guys jumping to WCW. But Bret specifically, Bret got me into wrestling. I loved watching Bret and Undertaker at SummerSlam 97. I loved Shawn Michaels too. But when Bret jumped to WCW, I followed along. I wanted to see what they were going to do with him. And famously, they did not do much with Bret. But can't fault the Hitman for that. Although some people want to debate that. I specifically chose this picture specifically because I feel like as much as Bret is, a lot of photos of him are holding the world championship when he became the world champion, but later in 99 and 2000, Bret really made me give a crap about the United States Championship. And this was a championship that was passed around a lot in WCW. And it never really did anything. There were a lot of champions, Chris Jericho, I'm trying to think of a couple off the top of my head, DDP, which I love, Macho Man, but Brett really gave this championship a lot of life. I really liked him being that fighting champion. And the one thing that I feel that Brett had a problem with, and I feel like you can tell, especially for how much they flip-flopped, was his allegiance with the NWO and Hogan, like if he was going to be with the NWO officially or not, and he played it back and forth. I didn't really care about that. I really cared about Brett just being a competitor. One of the best moments for Brett, and I think any Bret Hart fan who watched him during WCW would agree, that his rivalry with Bill Goldberg, as he calls him, before the kick that unfortunately took him out of action and ended his career, the build up to his rivalry with him was one of the best. He was one of the very few competitors in WCW who was not afraid of Goldberg. And that was such a fun thing to see, because Goldberg at that time, even after losing his first match, he was still running through opponents pretty quickly. But then you had somebody like Brett, who, is a pretty built person, going up against a guy that is Goldberg. He's huge, and he didn't back down. He did not falter on his intimidation towards Goldberg. And the pinnacle of it was in Toronto, which I love this clip, where he came out and he's wearing a Leafs jersey. And he comes out and he's yelling at Goldberg saying, "I don't care that you played for the Atlanta Falcons. This is hockey country." And starts calling out Goldberg. Goldberg comes running out. Goldberg gets to the corner, hits him with the spear, but knocks himself out. And no one knows what happens. Brett slowly crawls over, pins Goldberg, counts his 3. And it isn't until Brett stands up, rips the jersey off, you realize he has a metal plate on his stomach to take that spear. And it was one of the most genius things I'd ever seen. I remember going to school the next day and having friends be like, "That is the smartest comeback to that spear I've ever seen. Why has no one thought of that?" It was such a fun thing. And Brett did have a pretty darn good career. I know a lot of people say that it was cut short because of Goldberg, and that is true, but he did a pretty good amount in WCW, being multi-time US champion, winning that world championship finally at Mayhem again in Toronto. He did have a pretty solid run in WCW for what he, coming off of the Montreal Screwjob and then losing his brother in 99. Like, that's a lot for somebody to go through. And he still had a pretty good run up until, unfortunately, the kick that ended his career. For the most part, he did come back in WWE later on in about 2013. And it wasn't great, but it was good to see Brett back. Shinobi in chat says, "Brett is my all-time favorite. Thought his WCW was atrocious. In 98, having him go heel to face back 5 different... Yeah, but he was still a joy to watch in the ring." Exactly. I love Brett, and that flip-flop was kind of, I'm aligned with Hogan, I'm not aligned with Hogan. I thought that was a falter. But overall, if you knew Brett was in the match, you knew it was a good match. Lark Bark said WCW dropped the ball. Yeah, agreed. They could have done a lot more with him. There is some talk of whether he was not the same person, after the Montreal Screwjob and trusting people and all that. And I get that, but overall, no matter what, Brett was still a great addition to the WCW roster, and he did as much as he could with what he was given. So we've gone through Sting. We've gone through Brett. Both really good rivalry, but that was a very good rivalry between the two. We're going to go a little bit more to the cruiserweight, a little bit more to a former U.S. champion, and has made himself even a bigger superstar in WWE and now in AEW, and that is Chris Jericho. So this is a very, very young Chris Jericho. I always liked Chris. I've always liked Chris. I'll be honest, I worked with him at Niagara Falls Comic-Con 3-4 years ago. Great guy in person, very charming, very happy to say hi to everybody. I was always a big fan of Chris. I thought he was extremely entertaining when I first got into WCW. He was one of that group that really stood out, you know, with your Benoits, your Malenkos, Saturn, all that radicals group, I guess you'd call it. I thought he was a standout, and I'm so glad that he took that advantage that he had and brought it to WWE, because I feel like if he did stay in WCW, they wouldn't know what to do with him and wouldn't be able to bring him to the next level of his career. He was such a hilariously cocky heel. You know, the Monday Night Jericho shirts were just hilarious to see. Having his bodyguard, his big, you know, he was actually a truck driver, the big bodyguard Ralphus. Having him walk around and do the knock it on doors in the back, doing the Spinal Tap, getting lost, going to the ring was such a fun shtick, even if you didn't know it was a Spinal Tap reference. Him calling out Goldberg, again, similar to Brett, of just, I don't care. Like, I know I can beat Goldberg, even though it didn't actually transpire, but he was such a fun person. Boomster Joe, armbar, yes, the man of 1,004 holds. For those who don't know, back in the day, Chris Jericho was a competitor against another amazing wrestler, Dean Malenko. Dean Malenko was known as the man of 1,000 holds, and Jericho said, well, no, I can do 104, so I'm better than you, and I've written them all down. And he drops a giant Santa Claus style list to show off to everybody, and he starts going through the list alphabetically: armbar, arm drag, and then cuts to commercial and comes back, and he's still on A's. It was hilarious. He was such a great heel. Very entertaining. I'm glad, like I said, he was able to go more and do more in the WWE, and even more in WCW, or more in AEW, and even his stuff in Japan with Kenny Omega. I'm not a big, watching the New Japan stuff, but his match with Kenny was great. He's done some amazing stuff in watching old tapes in Japan with him and Benoit. Overall, Jericho's a great guy, and I hope he ends up coming back to WWE in the next little while. There's been rumors ever since, for the past few years, it feels like that they're going to bring him back and they're going to do a Hall of Fame induction with him. I would be surprised if they didn't, because he's done such a great job over the years. Shinobi in chat, armbar gets listed about 300 times. Well, yeah, it's a very important hold, of course. Chris Jericho is brilliant and still is as of today. Yes, I agree, Lark Bark. He's such a great competitor. He's reinvented himself so many times and deserves all the success he gets. Like, I know there's some people who got really tired of his AEW run, and I understand that. I feel AEW is not my favorite company. I haven't been a big fan of the way they've booked a lot of their stars, but overall, he's done the best he can with it, and that's all you can do. So we've talked about Sting, we've talked about Brett. Let's jump into someone that I have been a fan of. This was one of the guys that when I started watching WCW, I went, okay, that's my guy. He's number one to me. I want to follow his career because I think he's such a cool guy, to the point that I am actually a fan of his yoga program, and I have this little guy sitting in front of me every day when I'm here on my computer, and that is the man, DDP. I love DDP. I love DDP yoga. I am a DDP mark. I will completely agree. I've got the DDP yoga t-shirt. I do the yoga every other day. This guy's incredible. And he was an incredible wrestler back in WCW. This guy has got one of the most inspirational careers that I think anyone has ever had. This guy started wrestling at 35 years old. 35 years old, this guy started. He started as a manager, and all the people in WCW were saying, this guy, he's too big. He can't manage. He's out-bigging the other wrestlers. So then he started actually wrestling, and by the time he was like 38, he was the WCW champion. He works his arse off, and I always knew he was going to have a great match every time he came to the ring. You had the incredible rivalry with Randy Savage, where it was basically Kimberly and DDP versus Liz and Randy, and that made Rivalry of the Year from PW Insider in 97, and it absolutely deserved it. You've got one of, if not Goldberg's best matches at Halloween Havoc 1998. The one that was supposedly headlined by Hogan and Warrior, which wasn't, because everyone hated that match. These guys came on second and blew them out of the water, and unfortunately there's a whole didn't get to see it because of the stream and stuff. But overall, DDP, unbelievable. And you know what? I know some people who are hardcore wrestling fans who will look at the celebrity stuff that DDP did. DDP is not just a normal wrestler, folks. WCW had DDP have a match with NBA star Karl Malone as his partner versus Dennis Rodman and Hulk Hogan. And that's just, thankfully, two athletic guys that aren't wrestlers but still athletes colliding in the ring. That did so well that WCW went, okay, you're now going to have Jay Leno as a partner versus Hogan and Bischoff. That's a lot of responsibility to throw on a wrestler. To take someone who is an athlete, like a Karl Malone, like a Dennis Rodman, and in WCW version, a Logan Paul or a Stephen Amell, that's one thing. To then take someone who is not a wrestler and not an athlete like Jay Leno and have a competent match with him, which that match at Hog Wild is a competent match, or Road Wild, not a great match, a competent match. That was pretty darn cool to see that DDP could pull that off. I give him a round of applause for that. And if you don't know about what DDP has done post his wrestling career, you are missing out. I completely understand if after the Monday Night Wars you stop watching, but DDP, and I cannot wait to meet him in June. I've met him once before. I did a DDP yoga seminar when he was in London a few years ago, but I cannot wait to meet him at Niagara Falls Comic Con. Plug. Because this guy has changed so many guys' lives because of DDP and DDP yoga. We would not have Jake the Snake Roberts without him. Jake the Snake Roberts would probably not be here if it wasn't for him. We got more time with Scott Hall before he passed away. He's helping Buff Bagwell. He's helping out Butterbean. He's helping out thousands of people with his DDP yoga program. There are not many guys who finish a wrestling career and do more in the world than DDP has done. This guy's a Hall of Famer. He is an absolute legend. And as much credit as he gets for what he's done, I still don't feel like he gets enough. Because it's one thing to perform in the ring. It's one thing to, be a trainer at NXT or something like that. This guy is taking people into his house, his home, and helping them recover from drugs, alcohol, weight, and a whole bunch of other stuff. That's a different thing. So I will never not love this guy. That's why I got that Pop Funko there, because anytime I get into I'm not good enough mood, or I feel like something's bad, I go, man, you just got to start thinking more positive, and it's because of people like DDP. Lark Bark in chat says, DDP had a late start, although I admire DDP as a person. He's done a lot of good for the community. DDP is a great person, and humble too. Agreed. He could be a lot more, preachy in how great he is. He isn't. He's actually a super sweet guy. All right, we've gone through a few. Let's go through a few more. We've talked about him through a bunch of different rivalries with some past superstars. Let's throw him in now, because you can't talk about WCW without Goldberg. And people in the WWE camp may call him a knockoff Steve Austin. I see the look of the resemblance, but come on, guys. There's a big difference between Steve Austin and Goldberg. Goldberg, that undefeated streak as a kid, that was amazing. And there's so many people who look back on stuff like the winning streak and him going from 1 week being, going from 110 wins to he'll do a live event and the next week it's 300. I didn't care about that when I was a kid. I cared about him plowing through opponents with that spear and a jackhammer and just destroying opponents. That's all I cared about. I remember him doing an interview and being like, I come out, I snort the smoke, I just spear people, jackhammer, I go back. That's all I needed as a kid. He was so cool. He was someone that I as a kid I wanted to emulate. I saw him as like the Terminator. He just plowed through so many people. Finding out later on in life that this guy is a giant animal lover, loves doing stuff for his community, loves, helping people in need, makes it even better, because with that winning streak and with that type of, how great you think you are, that ego that can come with being a champion and being in WCW at the time, he could have definitely just been like, I'm done this wrestling thing. Screw you guys. I'm enjoying my money. No, this guy cares about his community. Seems like a super nice guy. Anybody that I know that has met him says he's amazing. I wish we could get him up here for a Comic-Con because I would love to give him his flowers. Overall, it's Goldberg. Like, if you watched WCW as a kid, I don't know how you could not love Bill Goldberg. Like, it's Goldberg. Like, and coming back in WWE, he did a great job as well. Like, coming back and seeing him just not dominate like he did, but still have that aura of it was still so cool. Boomsha Joe said Goldberg was lightning in a bottle for WCW. That's what's said in a documentary, and it's true. 100%. He is lightning in a bottle. They got very lucky with him, and he deserves all the credit he gets. So we've gone through a bunch of WCW guys. As I said earlier, I did grow up in the 97, 98 era, which means you had to be a little bit NWO, and I was a lot NWO. And this guy, unfortunately, we just lost him, and he has a lot of stigma about him, and I completely understand everyone's opinion of him. However, as a kid in 98, there weren't many cooler people to me than Hollywood Hogan, and not Hulk Hogan. I remember watching WWE and kind of jumping headfirst into all the history of WWE. And I remember watching Hulk Hogan, the yellow and red back in the day, bored me to tears. This guy, the black and white NWO Hogan, that was cool to me. I really dug it, the Hulk Hogan. I was not my favorite NWO member. We're going to get to him next. But I dug him. I thought he was a great chicken shit heel, which is something I don't think a lot of wrestlers are really good at nowadays. He was really good at being big and dominant, but when he saw Sting, when he saw Goldberg at certain points, when he saw Giant, when he saw Luger, he got scared, and that was great because he had all of the NWO guys to throw towards them, and they got to take the abuse while he got to sit back and hold that belt and do his poses. I dug that. I thought that was really cool. I unfortunately never got to meet Hogan, which kind of sucks as a wrestling fan. That's one of the people I never got. I did have one shot. He was at Fan Expo one year, and I just, for stupid me, I was like, oh, he'll be back, and he just never did, which kind of bums me out now. But again, I know why people have their feelings about Hulk and his later career and his later life. I completely understand people's understanding. He made a lot of mistakes. He chose a lot of stupid choices. I know, and I agree. But him at 98, when I was a kid, spray painting the NWO belt, like, that was so cool. So cool that when I went to Florida when I was a kid, my mom, it was 98, so I was 9. Yeah, I was 9, 10. I remember walking through one of the stores, the knick-knack stores you go to in Florida and anywhere else you go to that's a travel destination. And I remember walking through and seeing a bandana that had white and blue lightning through it. And it reminded me so much of his tights. And I went, I want that bandana. And I think I still have it somewhere. I think I have it over at my mom's place, back in a closet. But yeah, that's how much of a Hogan fan I was. I was like, nope, he's a pretty darn cool guy. So again, I understand people's thoughts and his opinions about later life. But me, 97, 98, That was a pretty cool guy. Shinobi said, yeah, I never liked Face Hogan and didn't think much of Terry in real life, but I did like Hollywood Hogan. Yeah, it was just such a fun aura. It was just such a fun aura of him being, the older, the heel was such a fun thing for him. And and that's the funny thing. I never liked, even when Hogan came back in WWE in 2002, 2003, didn't really care. Didn't really care. But that NWO, that was so cool. That was so cool. Didn't like him in WWE, though. When he came back in 2002, I was at WrestleMania 18, and I was one of probably 2 people in that entire building going, Rocky, Rocky, and everyone cheering him. And I'm like, what is wrong with all you people? Like, he's the heel. Why does everyone love him? I get it now. But personally, I like the WCW version. I thought anything WWE was just, it wasn't for me. Lark Barton says Hogan did have the best heel turn in professional wrestling, which is going 30 years this summer. It is. Whoa. I didn't think about that. It has been 30 years since Bash of the Beach. Wow. It has been 30 years. Holy crap. Damn. They would have done something. That sucks that he's gone, because they would have done something with that. I could definitely see him want to do something with that. And Scott's not with us either. Shit. Damn. Hopefully Kev does something. Bummer. Wow, 30 years. Okay, so that was the leader of the NWO. Let's talk about my favorite member of the NWO. And thankfully, I can say that this guy was the coolest guy to me in WCW and NWO. And once I met him, it was exactly what I thought he would be. Just as cool in real life. And that is Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash was just cool personified. Like, Kevin was one of the only members, I would say, of the NWO who was able to take the wrestling version of the NWO and really try and bring the hip hop rap thing into it. And I get he's a 7-foot white guy, but he was making that stuff cool, like really cool back in the day. I always wanted to be Kevin Nash when I was a kid. I actually went to a mall in the States one time with my mom, and I picked up a toy that I've never, ever seen before. And I will clip this and I'll throw a picture up here. It is like a 4-foot plush Kevin Nash toy. He's in black and red, the black and red singlet. I've never seen this toy before, and I am like holding on to this thing because I've messaged a bunch of different toy groups and that no one knows what this is. So maybe I've got some rarity, and it's an official WCW toy. It is not a knockoff. But I've always loved Nash. I've always thought he was the coolest guy. The jackknife powerbomb is like one of the sickest looking moves, and I know some people think it's dangerous. If it is, I'm sorry. I still think it looks dope. Him powerbombing the Giant and that whole storyline of them doing the powerbomb being an illegal move, and every time he does it, he gets fined, and he just starts powerbombing people, just saying, I don't care, fine me, arrest me. I thought that was so cool. That made him such a cool guy. And then, yeah, jackknifing the Giant. Like, jackknifing a guy bigger than him, and supposedly he hurt himself doing it. But it looked so cool as a kid. And then his rivalry with Rey Mysterio, where Rey's trying to be the Giant Killer, and him just throwing Rey all over the place. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. Yeah, what can I say? I loved the coolness of Nash when he did the NWO Black and Red. When he pulled up the Wolfpack, I thought it fit him perfectly. I've always been a fan of Kevin. I've thought, and like I said, when I met him when he came to Niagara Falls, he was amazing. He was such a sweet guy. Loved telling stories. Lark Bark in chat says, remember Kevin Nash MTV Spring Break? I remember seeing that clip. For those who don't know, they had an outdoor party for MTV Spring Break, and I think it was him, Hall, and Waltman, I think it was the 3, and someone threw a battery and it hit him, and he just jumps off the stage and looks like a friggin' lion running at this kid. And once he grabs the kid's probably like 13. So he's like, I can't beat the crap out of a kid, but there's a clip online from MTV, and you see it sort of like, oh, it's not an over the shoulder of the kid that threw it, but it's of that area. And you just see Kevin running through people. It is terrifying if he's running at you. But yeah, I've always been a big Kevin Nash fan. I thought he was an amazing wrestler. He was such a cool guy, and even cooler in real life. We've got 3 left. We're at 7:51. I promise I will get you guys out here at a good time tonight. We've talked a lot about main eventers. We've talked about Sting. We've talked about Goldberg, Brett, Hogan, Nash. Let's jump down to the cruiserweights, because WCW would not be WCW without a few amazing cruiserweights. Now, I know y'all are probably going to say, what about Eddie? What about Ray? What about Psychosis? What about Juventud? I love them. I loved all of them. I was a big Eddie Guerrero fan, more in WWE. Rey Mysterio, never a giant Ray fan. I know everyone loves him, not my guy. My cruiserweight was Billy Kidman, because, dude, the 450 off the shooting star press off the top, that was a move as a kid that was like, boom, there's no way that's physically possible. But there's a guy that looks about my size, a little bigger, but when I was a kid, I'm like, he looks kind of like me. He dresses, I can get that gear. I could be a wrestler. Yeah, I always liked Kidman. I thought he was such a fun wrestler. That shooting star press was incredible to see as a kid. I know he botched it on a bunch of different people, but like, for a move like that, the chance of error is so small that he could totally mess that up, and he did. But overall, he hit so many of them. Like I said, the jeans and the beater, that was such a cool look. It was such a normal look. Like, there were so many wrestlers out there now that have stolen that look, that had used like the most basic attire, and it just looks so crummy having 50 wrestlers on a roster that all look similar. He was like the only one that pulled it off then and looked pretty cool in that type of attire. He had the benefit of dating Tori Wilson, which every guy who knew Tori Wilson and seen her was so jealous of that guy. So there's a little bit of jealousy from most of us. I thought when he was the Cruiserweight champion, I thought he did a great job with that belt. He was a fighting champion. He always was in stellar matches. He had great opponents to work with, which helped, having the Eddies, having Rays, having Juventud, having Psychosis, having Malenkos, all those guys. Something just drew me to Kidman. Like I said, it's probably because I saw, if I grow my hair out and I go to Walmart, I could be a wrestler. But overall, and by the way, great job in WWE now. He is an agent in the back, but when he goes to WWE, there are very few theme songs that I absolutely love. His is one of them. YouTube it after this. Go to WWE's Billy Kidman theme songs. I thought that was one of the coolest songs. When my buddies and I had our indie backyard wrestling league, that was one of the first theme songs that I was like, that's on my list. No one gets the Billy Kidman theme, because I just thought that was such a cool song. Boomster Joe said, what I like about Kidman was the underdog energy. 100%. And even when he became a heel later on with the New Blood and wanting to, having matches with Hogan, which a lot of people have said that is something Hogan has requested. He wanted to work with people like Kidman. He did a great job. He did a great job in that role. So I've always been a Kidman fan. 2 left, folks. It's WCW, and even in 97, 98, you could not talk about WCW without the person that I think, besides Sting, is the most synonymous with WCW, and that is the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Rick is WCW. Rick will always be WCW. He will always be the face of that company because he was the face of that company for so many years before I started watching. But even in 97, 98, reforming the Horsemen, you know, he was never really in the world title picture. He was a little bit in the early 97, but not really later. But having him be the figurehead in a lot of the stuff going into the beginning of the NWO, you know, having, like I said, reform the Horsemen with the Malenko, Benoit, McMichael, and a couple others. He was always at the forefront of WCW, even if he was in a joking type thing where he was, you know, getting down to his underwear and dropping elbows in the middle of the ring. He was just fun. And everyone knows Rick. It's one of those people that, like a Hogan, like an Austin, you could show almost anybody a picture of Ric Flair, and while they may not know his name exactly, they'll know to woo. They'll know he's a big wrestler and that he's important. So, you know, with the Horseman legacy, fighting Piper, fighting Hogan, all of that stuff in WCW, he did a great job. Even later on in the career, into the 2000s, you know, him fighting in Street Clothes with, you know, tagging with Lex Luger, the total package, he did a great job. So you can't say anything bad about Rick. And actually, there is a little part of me that is contemplating doing this exact costume as a cosplay. I have talked to people, some of them who were in chat and are not in chat anymore because they're not wrestling fans. I have thought about making this butterfly robe as a cosplay and doing a Ric Flair cosplay because I am not the most athletic person in the world, but neither's Rick. So it kind of works. But yeah, I've always loved Rick. He's always been a fun guy and met him multiple times at Comic-Cons. And if you've never met Rick and you get the opportunity, do it. He's super fun. He's super entertaining. You'll have a blast with him. I've told many stories on the podcast about meeting Rick and talking about him. So if you get a chance, go meet him. And last but not least, we're at the number 10 spot. Again, these are not in order. This is just the 10th one we're talking about. And I feel like it would be a very big disservice to not have this person on the list because of how great of a wrestler he was, how great of an entertainer he was. And unfortunately, he is no longer with us, but he will complete the three-peat of NWO members, and that is Scott Hall. I mean, that picture alone is such a cool picture. Like, he is cool. He is exactly that. He is the bad guy. He is cool. As a wrestling fan, he is one of the wrestlers that made anything he did look easy. Like, back in the day, it's not like today where a lot of the matches are scripted out. They're planned highly in advance. With Scott's matches, and even back then, they were a lot of, you know, calling it on the fly, improvising it in the ring. Scott always seemed like no matter what happened, he knew exactly what to do. And that was rare even back then with your Hogans, with your Bretts, with, you know, Flairs and all these people that have been around for years. Scott was just smooth the whole time. You know, seeing him, pretty big guy, but going against people like, you know, having people around him like a Hogan or a Nash and still making something that the outsider's edge just looks so cool. Getting people up in the cross and throwing him across the ring looks so cool. The coolest, and I think this is non-debatable, they're in the ring. The entire NWO is in the ring. They're doing a promo, and Scott is there, and he's talking. He's talking about how great he is. And someone fires a pop at him, and it just hits him in the head. And what does he do? Does he relax? Nope. He just slicks his hair back. Like, it's the sickest look. He could have done so many things, but it's just, I know how good I am. Scott was so cool. Another person that unfortunately I never got to meet. He was supposed to come to Niagara Falls Comic Con during the 2020 con. He was announced for during the pandemic, and unfortunately they didn't do the con, and unfortunately he was not able to do conventions after that, because not long after that he was no longer with us. But just such a great wrestler. Even in WWE, when he came back for a few matches in 2002, he was great. Watching all of his Razor Ramon stuff back in the day was such a fun thing. Like I said, when I was back in the day, definitely, I trained to be a professional wrestler for a year. There's a local school that was here. It's now become, if you're in the Hamilton area, they're now pretty much Alpha One is what it became. They had a wrestling school that my buddy and I signed up for, and I remember somebody had come in as a guest to train us, and they were talking to us about doing research and watching tape and stuff. And I said, who do you recommend? And everyone was like, you should watch Brett, you should watch Sean, because they were so good. And they're like, watch Scott Hall, watch his matches, because again, like I said, smooth. Like, you will see the things that he does and how fluid he does it. That's your goal, is to get that smooth in the ring, that it's like second nature. So yeah, unfortunately, no longer with us. Jacob in chat throwing up the wolf pack. Lark Bark played it so cool. Hey yo, rest in peace. 100%. And his Razor Ramon stuff was hilarious. Yeah, that's a fun gimmick, and that's such a fun gimmick for him to do, and him being able to bring some of that into WCW, and even doing some fun things like the survey. Like, I just doing a little thing like that. Like, I think that's something that a lot of wrestlers today, they want to do all the fun spots, they want to do all these amazing things, but you need to think about, you're able to do things and not have to take a bump. Like, you can do things in the ring and not throw yourself at the ground. And Scott being able to walk out there and just be like, hey, let's do a survey, and get the crowd to pop. He can do a half-ass match after that if he wanted to. He didn't. He still did an incredible match. But he could have came out, do that survey, do a half-ass match, and go home, and everyone would be like, Scott Hall's amazing. And that's one of the coolest things about him, is he could just come out and be charismatic and, just be Scott. And he was, and I love him, and I wish he was still here. That is it, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. Lark Bark says, damn, I miss WCW. I agree. I miss WCW too. If you are wanting to watch WCW, I will give WWE credit. They do have YouTube channels now called WWE Vault, and I believe it's WCW Vault and ECW Vault on YouTube, and they are uploading pay-per-views, promos, matches, DVDs, etc. onto those channels. It's basically like what the network used to be, but now it's all free on YouTube. So go check that out. I throw it on every once in a while to throw on old WCW stuff. They throw some weird stuff on there. Actually, if you're a fan of WWE from like the 2001, 2002 era, if you guys remember the Desire video where they played the Creed song, they have uploaded a new HD, like, remastered version of that to the network, or to the YouTube channel, a couple days ago. It's really cool looking. So go check that out after this. Folks, I really appreciate you guys being here. I know this isn't, some people think this is a cosplay channel. I try and do a variety of different nerdy things. This week was wrestling. Want to talk a little bit about WCW. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate some of you, which I know you are behind the scenes, just listening in the background. I get it. Wrestling's not for you, but you still want to support the channel. I appreciate it. If you guys can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, it would mean a lot to me. We're here every single Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking about nerdy things. And next week, we're going to jump into... We're not going to talk about specifically cosplay, because we've done a couple cosplay episodes, but we are going to talk about something that I think a lot of people talk about, especially if you do something like this online, or you post anything online. And that is, we're going to talk about dealing with online negativity. Because we all, as cosplayers, fans of things, you've posted something at some point and somebody has left a shitty comment or something like that. I'm going to talk about how I deal with online negativity, and maybe you guys can take some of those tips and use them for yourself. So we're going to talk about that next week. And then we're getting into con season. We're then going to do a couple reviews. We're going to talk about Toronto Comic-Con and Toronto Game Expo. And then we're ending the month with probably a guest. We're going to have probably the first week of April, we're going to have a guest. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you guys spending your time with me. Have yourselves a good night. We'll be back here next week. And like I said before, if you haven't followed or subscribed on TikTok and on Instagram and here on YouTube, do it now, because I got a whole bunch of new content I'm shooting and a whole bunch of things that are going to be posted over the next little while. So make sure you don't miss out. All right. Take care, folks. We will see you guys very, very soon. Love you all. See ya. Thanks so much for watching Monday Night Nerd. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any new episodes.